This is a true story, buried in silence for over 10 years. Recently, it resurfaced online and quickly spread everywhere, not just because it's terrifying, but because it actually happened. In Mauritius, there are taboos so deep that breaking them can cost you more than just your peace of mind. This is the story of a child, a spirit that couldn't move on, and nights haunted by a dark presence at exactly 1 a.m. The story is called The Chill from a Fresh Grave. The old house, sitting on my maternal great-grandparents' land, always held a quiet, somber atmosphere. 11 years ago, when my sister and I were still children, that quiet was suddenly ripped apart by a horror that, even now when night falls, feels like a bone-deep cold still clings to me. My maternal great-grandmother passed away on a late autumn afternoon. According to local custom, her body was brought back home for the funeral rites. Her death wasn't entirely sudden. She was very, very old. But it was the way she left us, and what happened afterward, that was truly terrifying. The ritual bathing of the body is a sacred rite, forbidden to children. Mom had repeatedly warned me and my sister, Emily, she was only 6 then, not to go near the room where the adults were performing the ceremony. She said, "There's a cold energy there, something not good. Children's spirits are weak, stay away." I was scared by Mom's words, but my sister, Emily, held a strange curiosity, as if pulled by an invisible force. The little one secretly followed our aunt, then peeked through the crack in the door. I stood further away, shuddering as I watched her small back trembling. That peeking moment lasted less than a minute, but it felt as though it had opened a gate to hell. A week after the funeral, Emily began to change. It wasn't just that her asthma attacks became more frequent and severe. She also displayed strange behaviors. The little one would often stare into empty corners of the room and whisper things. At night, her wheezing coughs turned into terrifying screams at 1 a.m., numb, as regular as a curse. Emily didn't just cry. She thrashed on the bed, her hands clawing at her throat, her mouth uttering broken words. Cold. So cold. Let go. It hurts. The gesture wasn't typical coughing or difficulty breathing. It was exactly like someone being strangled. Her face was deathly pale, her eyes wide and staring into the blackness on the ceiling. My mother no longer dared to sleep alone with Emily. The three of them, Mom, my grandmother, and Emily, shared a large bed. One night, my grandmother woke up to go to the bathroom. The moment she stepped out of the room, Mom felt something heavy jump onto the edge of the bed. An icy coldness radiated outwards, making Mom's hair stand on end. She quickly hugged Emily tightly, closed her eyes, and whispered prayers. But that invisible thing did not let go. Mom felt a terrifying force pull Emily out of her arms. It wasn't an ordinary pull. It was a cold and malicious strength, as if wanting to tear the child apart. Mom tried to scream, but her throat felt constricted, only a weak, wind-like sound escaping. In that moment of extreme despair, Mom felt a cold breath on the back of her neck, accompanied by a low muttering, like fingernails scraping on old wood. "She is mine." Fortunately, my grandmother returned to the room. The moment she saw Grandma's shadow, that terrifying pull suddenly vanished. The cold energy dissipated, leaving Mom and Emily trembling in the dark night. Mom swore that as Grandma entered, she briefly saw a tall, shadowy figure, hazy like mist, disappear into the opposite wall. The battle with that night shadow lasted for 4 grueling months. Emily became emaciated, her skin sallow, always seeming to hover between life and death. The house was constantly shrouded in a heavy, gloomy atmosphere. Strange noises became more frequent, light footsteps creaking upstairs when no one was there, objects falling and breaking in the kitchen in the dead of night, or an unusual smell, like wet earth mixed with wilting lilies. My parents took Emily everywhere: hospitals, Hindu temples, Catholic churches. Doctors shook their heads, helpless. Priests at the temples, the pastor at the church performed prayers and sprinkled holy water, but their effects were only temporary relief. The night shadow still returned at 1 a.m. They even sought out rumored witch doctors. Some spoke nonsense. Others sensed a presence but couldn't cope, only adding to the family's despair. I, only 10 years old then, had to take on the task of looking after my toddler brother, while my mind was constantly filled with dread for my sister. Children's laughter and voices gradually faded in that house. When hope was almost extinguished, someone directed my family to an elderly woman living in a distant rural area. She wasn't a witch doctor, didn't advertise widely. She just lived quietly and helped those who came to her with a God-given boon, as you mentioned. The old woman's house was simple, but it exuded a quiet, warm energy. The moment she saw Emily, the old woman's usually kind eyes showed a flicker of sorrow. She didn't say much, only asked the family to bring Emily often. The process of healing wasn't dramatic, just simple rituals with holy water, whispered prayers, and sometimes the burning of a certain herb that released a light but strange fragrance. However, each time Emily visited the old woman, her asthma would worsen slightly afterward, and the nightly haunting seemed more intense for the first few days. It felt as if the thing clinging to Emily was struggling, resisting being driven away. Once, as the old woman was performing a rite, a loud crack suddenly echoed from the corner of the room, like something snapping. Gradually, the improvement became clear. Emily's difficulty breathing lessened, the nightly screams became less frequent, then stopped entirely. Her face regained its color, her eyes no longer held that constant look of terror. On the final session, when Emily was completely recovered, the old woman revealed the truth that stunned the entire family. She said, "The thing haunting the little one was the spirit of your great-grandmother." The family was shocked. The old woman explained further, "Your grandmother was not meant to die at that time. She died because of a great shock. Something shattered inside her just before her last breath. She did not accept death. Her spirit was full of resentment and could not move on." The old woman looked deeply into my mother's eyes. When a spirit cannot let go and is full of hatred, it will seek something to cling to unleash its anger. This child, with her weak constitution and untimely curiosity, accidentally opened the door and became the perfect target. Your great-grandmother's spirit couldn't harm the people who truly caused her suffering, so she chose to torment this innocent grandchild instead, to find release. That cold and cruel explanation choked the whole family. So my great-grandmother's death wasn't simply due to old age, and her resentment, though we were not involved, fell upon my sister. Emily is now a healthy, energetic, 17-year-old teenager. She doesn't remember anything about that terrifying period. That's a good thing. I don't want that shadow from the past to haunt her life. But for the rest of the family, the scar remains. Whenever we walk past my great-grandmother's old room or when night falls, a sudden chill can still make us shiver slightly. The cold from the new grave, or perhaps from an unrested past, might still be lurking somewhere, a reminder that some spiritual doors, once opened, are very difficult to close completely.